Okay, so we are about to be entering the round of 16 here in the ASL. I wanted to do this earlier, a map review, I should say, of all the maps we have for this season, but I was too busy. So in this little period between the group selections and the actual round of 16 started, I thought we would hop into the maps and take a look at what this season's maps are. I think this is actually one of the better seasons as far as map selection goes. I think this year especially has been better than the last couple of them. I think we had some maps that got a little bit too experimental, but had too many ideas at once. By the way, if you like this kind of content, please subscribe to the channel. You can always follow me on Twitch. I make all this content live on Twitch, as well as try to improve at StarCraft and other games too. And if you have the chance, before we even go into the maps here, check out my merch shop. So you got Tasteless GG shirt right here. A lot of other cool, funny stuff you can wear. So to start this off, I'm going to just get this map out of the way immediately. Polypoid. This is a map we've had for actually quite a long time. I think 3 or 4 years here for StarCraft 1. One thing to keep in mind with these maps that are fairly basic is that every Star League will always try to keep one of these maps in there. What we'd call like a standard ladder map or a pretty standard tournament map. So I'm sure if you guys have been active, you know this map, right? But the good thing about maps like this is that it allows players who watch the ASL to actually take the builds and try them out on their own. There are pretty experimental maps we have in ladder pools, but you can always veto them, right? And if you're a player who's bored of this map and you're an expert and you're done learning on this map, you can always veto that instead. So there's been a couple, I think, minor adjustments on Polypoid, but overall nothing of any major significance. This is just turned into, I think, one of the new standardized maps that we've got. It is a map where every single base, besides the natural, is on high ground. Whenever anything's on high ground, it's always way easier to control and way easier to defend. So it is definitely a map that rewards camping. And even with the natural expansions that we have down here, naturals are always easy to hold. You know what I mean? These are designs that you can turtle up and camp in them. Just so you know, every season of ASL, you'll always see one of these basic maps involved, and that's by design. As much as we want to get crazy with the maps, we want to have maps that fans and newbies can at least start to play on. And so always having a map like this available is, I think, a good thing, and you'll always see that. Even in StarCraft 2, the idea is 1 to 2 maps that are pretty standard. So the next map, and this is another one I've really liked, this is Retro. We've talked about this a decent amount in ASL. It was in the previous season. So with maps like this, one of the things they're going for is less expansions. If you were to basically cut the map up into little rectangular fourths, this area here, think of that as just one spawn's expansion set. The same with here at the bottom left. This is sort of a location that you get. But you don't really get much more than that, right? Obviously, we're primarily watching 1v1s on this map. You could have probably some interesting 2v2s. But it's a map where certain matchups, one race gets a little bit more pressure to try to figure the game out later on. As an example, Protoss can't get that many bases. Very tough for Terran to get over 4 bases. But again, 4 bases might be enough on a map like this. All the bases very defendable. We do have these little mineral setups here in the middle. I've always liked experimenting with little resource setups in the middle of the map, because every once in a while when you get a game that's really cut in half and really slows down, especially on maps similar to Fighting Spirit, right, where all the bases are around the edge, I think having one little location in the middle to kind of force people to have some kind of skirmish in the center of their map is good. The bridges are really important. The first time I ever looked at this map and casted on it, I did not have an appreciation for the role the bridges can play. You can really turtle up here. In some respects, this map is actually a lot like Fighting Spirit, in that your third base is sort of given to you. You have your own land bridge to it, but structurally, it's got a tinier exit bridge, you know, to your entrance, as you can see here. And I guess the natural kind of sticks out a little bit more. But this is a welcome map, a little bit minimalist when it comes to bases. That's going to bring us to our next map, and this is Apocalypse. So this is a desert tile set map. There's been some interesting experimentation. I'm going to focus in the middle first, just because this is the thing I'm most excited about with this map. 3 high grounds to be controlled. And to be in the very, very center is a low ground. I see Gauntlet Wizard says we don't see enough desert maps. Some players complain a little bit about snow maps especially, and then desert maps. One of the reasons why you don't see snow maps used is that it's hard to see Protoss buildings warping in on the snow. I imagine if Blizzard wasn't, you know, a corpse as far as RTS goes, they could have made some fixes to maybe address that better. But yeah, these maps, I think if pro gamers had absolute control of everything, it would be like nothing but spaceship tile set and then the Badlands tile set, like what you see on Polypoid. But look, I think this is a really a cool map, and I think this is kind of a different take onto Sylphid. Sylphid, by the way, one of the best maps we've ever had. I think it's made for some really balanced, really interesting games here. This map, your third is available. It is a gas third, unlike some of the other maps we've seen where they give you a mineral only. But the issue is that there's a high ground area which makes it very pushable and containable. It does kind of force the player, if they're going to take 3 bases here, and we see some similarities here to Retro, right? If you're going to take 3 bases, you got to make sure that you control your high ground. And so it does have a mechanic that can kind of force the game to come to an end. If people got too greedy, they just get punished. Whereas other maps, think of this as the opposite of Polypoid, right? These bases are a lot harder to just hold. If you take a very premature third, you're probably just going to die. It does have these little corner spots over here. This stuff down here, don't be confused. This is not a physical blocker. So these are not island positions. I actually thought this was like a type of elevated surface, but that doesn't change the vision, like they have on Sylphid at those expansions that mine out pretty quickly. This is not. You can walk right up and down this. So these are just straight up bases, a little bit at the end of a valley. But yeah, I think this has been a good map. We've had some interesting games so far on it. I'm not going to give any spoilers away for Apocalypse. I welcome a map like this. Again, nothing too insane here from the map selection from Afrika TV regarding the first couple maps we've looked at. Tempest is a map I've not casted a lot of games on here, but I think there are some pretty interesting ideas. The biggest idea with Tempest, and I think we're going to see this more and more as we get to like the round of 8, where players are forced to get maps they're maybe not that comfortable on. This is a map where we have a reversed ramp. So you start out on the low ground and you have to fight onto the high ground. But once you get on the high ground, however you choose to do it, it is back down to the low ground outside the second base. So they are still experimenting with eggs on ramps. I don't really have much of an opinion on this, but you could kill the eggs to open this up more. This has certain impacts, in early game rushes. Also, like, you can't block your ramp with just a DT. Like, another DT could, if it was DT versus DT, they could attack the egg. I don't know if we're ever going to see these moments in a pro game, but just worth pointing it out. But the big idea here is that if you turtle at all, you can just get contained onto your high ground. And obviously some matchups that matters more than others. But it really incentivizes the player to try to take a quick expansion here. You got to remember that there's always chance to miss from low ground to high ground in StarCraft 1. Unlike StarCraft 2, where, if you get vision of the high ground, then you can just exchange damage. Here, there's, I think it's 48% chance to miss from low ground to high ground. So, as an example, like if I was a Protoss player and I fast expanded, I'm not afraid of a Hydra bust, or nowhere near as afraid. Same thing if I'm Terran. Let's say I take a quick base here with a bunker. I'm not afraid of Dragoons on my low ground, shelling the bunker and killing it. And I mean, you could probably say the same thing for TVT. All these matchups, this is going to play a factor. Probably not in ZVZ, but that's kind of always the exceptional map. And so it goes back down to low ground, up into high ground, up into an even higher point here in the middle. So it's a little bit of the opposite of Apocalypse in that you really have this incredibly high ground, incredibly high up area that you can use to set up tanks, to put lurkers up there. So central control is going to be important. The swirly shape of the map can be a little bit confusing. You can run around this this center area, but you're going to be going into some pretty congested lanes. So honestly, I don't know what this is going to look like if we get a really long game and one where, like TVT, for example, or one where it's like a PvZ and there's lurkers set up everywhere. It should make for some pretty interesting games. One other thing that I just noticed, Main, it's pretty easy to build stuff out here and drop into the main. Or you could load up Hydras in here and drop in there. You know, Terran doing those 2 to 4 ship drops in the mid game. Seems like there's a lot of area to kind of get in, and you can pretty much unload here or over on the other side. This is a cool map. We haven't seen as much of it yet in ASL. There's a lot of times when you have best of 1s, best of 3s still, the maps that are a bit weirder, the pros just won't bother to play on. They want to play on maps they've already done a bunch. And now we go to Neo Dark Origin. I've been a bit conflicted with this map. I guess the truth is this map does have some very cool ideas. There are definitely problems as you get further along in a game on this map. So they made some minor changes, but the most important thing you got to note, and I'll get this one out of the way right now, just going all the way to the bottom here. So there's this area down here. If you're able to slip a worker through here, keep in mind, sorry, the main base is over here to the right. So that's where you'd start. You can try to cheese your way through here, getting Zerglings, dropping or destroying this, however you want to do it. So you can get access to the main. It doesn't seem to play as much of a role at the highest levels because people are pretty good at you know, figuring this out. But if you're like a mid-tier player, this is a pretty tough map. But the bigger takeaway that we've got on this map is that it is really hard to beat somebody who controls the middle. So just looking at the bottom right location here, you got your spawn here, you got your natural, you got to watch out for whatever can happen down here. And then your third base can be taken up here. Now, your fourth organically would be up here, but the problem is, let's say that they're controlling the other side of these bridges. First of all, it's very hard, no matter what the matchup is, to ever get out. Secondly, they can hit you with siege tanks, they can put lurkers here, they can Psystorm your expansion. So we don't see as many games where like both sides get up to 4 maps. A lot of times it comes down to who's going to control this side of the bridges. And occasionally if you get like control of, let's say, this side of the bridges and you can even peek over here and make it hard to get into this area, that can take the game. It's also very abusable with Mutalisks. You can see this is a completely open area here. So Reavers, Mutas, the natural is very harassable. So I would say this is maybe the most challenging map early on. And if you've played a good early game, it's probably the easiest map in the late game if you've managed to get your lead and stay alive. We do have a base out here, and there's a mirrored position over here. Sometimes we see these bases taken, but really, if you want to follow a game on this map, you want to watch the third base and watch the center. And when I say I don't like that map this much, maybe I don't like playing on it that much, but I think it's really valuable to have good players play on this because it helps us unpack the early game and the mid game in a way that we sometimes don't get to see. I mean, you get a map like Polypoid, or where it's pretty easy to get a third base. Fighting Spirit, in some matchups it can be, in others it's easy to deny. But so this allows us to kind of see the game in a different light. It makes for some pretty interesting but also punishing games. This map is a challenging one, and I think it's one the pros are not crazy about right now. But let's go ahead and talk about it. Just looking at the bottom right spawn here, it's a 4-player map. You start down here. It is not a high ground area to get into your base, so it's a little bit like Neo Sylphid. You know, some matchups, the high ground plays a huge role. Other matchups, it just really doesn't. You know, you have to be able to defend and kind of play a game. PvP is a good example of this. People can get overpowered with 3-gate goon and stuff like that. But when you get your base up, it's actually it's a reasonable entrance. You can wall this off like you can any other map. It does have this area behind the minerals. You can expand over here, but that's very accessible from the middle. You can also try to squeeze into this little nook base over here. Keep in mind that a lot of this terrain out here is not buildable, so Terran can't make turrets here. If you're going to make a bunker and rush somebody on this map, you have to make it close to the hatchery. You can't try to chain them together. The reality is, it's a hard map to have a third base on. For one, you can get tanks over here. You can hit this really hard. This base, you can keep it, but again, the same idea. You can drop things over here and hit it. It's got a lot of a high ground area around it, which means you can't really see what's coming at you unless you have something flying over here to spot. It's a map where we see a lot of kind of funky plays. We've seen a lot of plays where people try to take the other natural or the other main, We do have this cross shape in the middle for mineral-only bases. But generally speaking, this is a very turtley map, where it seems like you could turtle up over here in your natural, but they can also just as easily camp outside your base and hit you. But the fact that there's a lot of islands on this map, unlike the previous one we looked at, is something that I think allows players to try to play around that. But from the games that I've watched on this, a lot of times it's just drops over and over and over again. And, you know, each side trying to punish or preempt that. So this is, I think, in more of the out there maps that we've got in ASL. But I think this is a welcome one. It is one the pros have tried to avoid. And now we're going to go to the final map. And this is Invader. So Invader was actually named after Space Invader. So this is, if you look at this guy and kind of turn him to like an angle, it looks like a little Space Invader ship. And so I always thought it looked like a bow-legged SCV. I mentioned that in ASL. It looks like an SCV that rode horses as a kid and its legs are all curved in. But this is a 1 versus 1 map here. There's no third spawn, no fourth spawn location. It's top left versus bottom right. And I'm actually kind of excited for this map. They used to make more maps like this, but it's really, you know, it's obviously symmetrical from the top right to the bottom left, but the fact that both players are playing in top left and bottom right, it makes for some interesting ideas. Do you want to expand up towards the right? Do you want to try to push down here towards the bottom left? The highest point as far as middle control here is right here in the center. At the same time, you could try to really have it out down here in the bottom of the map. It doesn't seem like there's any one way to contain somebody on this. Even once you get your natural up. And keep in mind, there's 2 entrances to your natural. So that's a little bit of a headache. That's definitely a problem if you're a new player, but for the ASL, these guys are generally very good at protecting that. But like, let's say there's a lurker contain here. Whatever, I'll go out here. Lurker contain there. Now I'm going up to the top. And so it seems like, unlike, for instance, the previous map we just looked at, this is a map that it doesn't want the game to be closed out in a contain. I guess not just like our previous map, our previous 2 maps. So a lot of maps you can just get suffocated. And they can control that position for 4 to 6 minutes, and the game's basically over. Hold on a second. Someone's at my door.
6.5 hours later.
Okay. My bottles of water have been delivered. We can pick back up here. Basically, this is a map that allows players to escape, and it's a map where you're probably going to have to conclude a fight over a base versus trying to get out of any contain here. And I always think a 1 versus 1 map is good. It allows proxies, it allows for specific strategies that you otherwise couldn't do. Overall, I think this is a really great season of maps. I think that these maps are more in the realm of competitive and playable. Occasionally we get a map like 76 or Sparkle where like there's a lot of cool ideas, but there's so many that it's so hard for the players to unpack in what is really a short period of time. And I think what they're doing effectively with the map selection in ASL Season 16 is they're having complicated maps with a couple interesting ideas and then still keeping the normal architecture of a competitive map. So I think we're going to have a lot of different games coming forward here with this ASL. I do hope you join us for Season 16. The round of 16 should be just around the corner. And thank you for watching. If you enjoy content like this, please subscribe. I will be doing content for both the StarCrafts as well as Stormgate and Zero Space and other RTS games are going to be coming out. Check out my merch shop. We got shirts like this and other fun stuff you can get at tastelessthreads.com. Check me out on Twitch, twitch.tv/tastelesstv. Thank you for watching, and I will see you hopefully in another video in the future. Bye-bye.